You tweeted a hot take this week and have alluded to it earlier in this pod that I wanted to talk about, where you said the most performant L1 will also be the most decentralized, which maybe is typically not how we think about the trade-offs between performance and decentralization. So why is it that you think that this is the case?
Right. Well, I actually think it's quite obvious. So perhaps I'm just really stupid, but I mean, the incentives. Okay, so blockchains, what are they? Or how do they work? Or why do they work? Well, they work because of the incentives, right? There's incentives. There's a game theory of, well, if you reward such and such people for such and such behaviors and punish them for such and such behaviors, then you don't actually have to trust any single one of them. You can trust the network. Okay, so it's an inherently incentive-based design. It doesn't work without that. Okay. However, for decentralization, people somehow completely forget the incentives. And I think this is largely a historical artifact of the triangle drawn on a blog post many years ago, known as the blockchain trilemma, which says performance and decentralization, for example, are, let's say, not synonymous without giving up something else. But I actually think it's the opposite. So, man, this would be great if I ever meet Peter Thiel and he's like, what's your one opinion nobody agrees with you on? Because the ideal answer is like, everybody thinks this, but it's actually the opposite of this. And I think this is one of them. And okay, so just do a thought experiment here. If you have a very accessible blockchain node requirements to run, like let's say you can just run it on your phone, but you get no money from doing it, right? There's no incentive for you to actually run it. There's already a lot of blockchains that do this, by the way, where a bunch of these L1s that are basically all dead, their node requirements are super accessible. You can just run them. Okay, so why don't people run those nodes? Well, they don't care. Why don't they care? Because multiple reasons. One is it's maybe not a good investment for the long term because the chain won't be around for too long. And maybe the reason is because it's not differentiated enough. And two is you don't generate income from doing it because there's no activity on the chain. And why is there no activity on the chain? Because it doesn't scale. Okay. So the only thing you're left with in that case is running a node based purely on vibes. Okay. You want to run a node just to say you run the node. Okay. Now, on Ethereum's case, well, one, you used to be able to make a lot of money doing this, but two, there's assets there to secure. So even if you're not making money from it, but you're an asset issuer, you would run a node regardless to help with security on your own end. So it's like a business line item on your expense sheet. Okay, so that makes sense. But other than that, it's just like, oh, I just run a node, right? Like even when people run like miners back in the day, why do they do it? Well, one is like it's cool, and you can just say you do it. But then two is you earn money from doing it. That's the whole incentive. Okay, so then how does the most performant lead to the most decentralized? Well, if you have the most performant chain, presumably you will have the most activity, right? Now, that has to hold true, by the way, right? So when I say the most performant will have the most decentralization, what that really means is the one with the most activity will have the most decentralization, of which performance is a necessary condition. And so, okay, so if you have the most performance and therefore the most activity, you then have the most revenue and fees. We're already seeing this today. Okay, we're already seeing this today on the blockchain, the Blockworks rev charts. Solana is the most performant, therefore it has the most revenue. Therefore, the validators make the most amount of income, right? So, for example, with Helios, when we first launched the validator, we didn't think we would make money from it because we just needed to support sending transactions because we're not a RPC provider. Turns out, when priority fees went live, you make a lot of money from doing it. Okay, and then now you can see all these other DeFi teams spinning up validators, right? Like the Drifts of the world. And so what's important is over a long time horizon, let's say 5 to 10 years, as less activity happens on the non-performant chain, more and more nodes will drop off because they just have no incentive to stay or for new entrants to come in. On Solana or whatever the performant L1 is, it's the opposite, where there's just money to be made in activity. So what you have an inherent incentive. And so when you say something like, well, the node cost on Solana is, let's say, 10 times higher than Ethereum. Okay, but what about the net income, right? Like, it doesn't matter if the node costs $1,000 a month if you're making $1 million a year. And it also doesn't matter if the node costs $1 a month and you're making $0 a year. Okay. Those things are not, nobody's just going to do it based on philanthropy or vibes. That's just not going to happen. And so that's basically just what that means. The only exception is there's a lot of these L1s, both in the past and currently, that actually get the performance due to capping the validator size, right? Like Sweet Aptos, for example, have roughly 100 nodes each. Say had like 29, 40, something like this, basically all in the same data center. Binance Smart Chain, all these different things, they're all very capped in node size. What Solana does that's like very, very different from everybody else that like not enough people appreciate is that it doesn't cap the node size, the amount of validators. So you can just add more validators to the nodes, validators to the network, and still get the same performance. And if that's the case, then you're both maxing performance and decentralization at the same time. That's never talked about, but that's arguably the most differentiated design in crypto today, right? Like the traditional wisdom is the more nodes you have, well, the more consensus overhead you have. As a result, the less performant you are. But Solana is designed in such a way where the additional nodes actually don't introduce that much overhead, provided you're above a certain threshold. So does that make sense?
That's a really interesting point. You should tell this to Peter Thiel. This doesn't like. How do you factor in something like Hyperliquid though? Because as you mentioned, like that, it's they cap their number of nodes. They're all co-located in Tokyo, and like to me, but they call themselves a layer one, which you can dispute, I guess, definitions. But like this argument maybe only applies to blockchains where the nodes aren't co-located and artificially capped, right? Because otherwise you probably could sacrifice decentralization for greater performance.
Well, my claim is that the most performant, or let's say the most decentralized chain will be the most performant one. It's not that you can't have performance any other way. Like for Hyperliquid, you can absolutely get a lot of performance by doing that, but you'll never be the most decentralized, which is fine. Like my claim isn't that you should be the most decentralized or it's good to do this and such. My claim is that from a physics perspective, if you just think about it, the most decentralized one has to be the one that's the most performant or has the most activity.